Chapter 5 Quillerin spent Tuesday morning at the Board of Education building, viewing an exhibition of schoolchildren's art. He hoped to write something tenderly humorous about the crayon sailboats floating in the sky, the purple houses with green chimneys, the blue horses that looked like sheep, and the cats. 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 After his venture into the uncomplicated world of juvenile art, Quillerin returned to the office in a state of contented detachment. His arrival in the feature department caused an unnatural silence. Typewriters stopped chattering. Heads that had been bent over proofs were suddenly raised. Even the green telephones were respectfully quiet. Arch said, "We've got news for you, Jim. We called Mount Clemens to make an appointment for you, and he wants you to go tomorrow night. To dinner." "Huh? Aren't you going to faint? The rest of the department did." "I can see the headline now," said Quillerin. "Critic poisons reporter's soup." "He's supposed to be a great cook," Arch said. "A real gourmet. If you're lucky, they'll postpone the arsenic until dessert." Here's his address. At 6 o'clock Wednesday night, Quillerin took a cab to 26 Blenheim Place. The address was in an old section of town, once a fashionable neighborhood of stately homes. Most of them had become cheap rooming houses or quarters for odd business enterprises. There was a mender of antique porcelain, for example. Quillerin guessed he was a bookie. Next door was an old coin shop, probably a front for a dope ring. As for the manufacturer of burlesque costumes, there was no doubt in Quillerin's mind as to the real nature of that establishment. In the midst of it all, one proud and plucky townhouse was making a last stand. It had a respectable residential air. It was tall for its width and primly Victorian, even to the ornamental iron fence. This was number 26. Quillerin dodged a pair of neighborhood drunks careening down the sidewalk and walked up the stone steps to the small portico, where 3 mailboxes indicated the building had been made into apartments. He smoothed his mustache, which was lively with curiosity and anticipation, and rang the bell. A buzzer unlocked the front door, and he walked into a tile-floored vestibule. Before him was another door, also locked, until a buzzer of another tone released it. Quillerin stepped into a palatial but dimly lighted entrance hall that enveloped him with its furnishings. He was aware of large gilt picture frames, mirrors, statuary, a table supported by gold lions, a carved bench like a church pew. Red carpet covered the hall floor and the stairway, and from the top of the flight came a voice with a finely honed edge. "Come right up, Mr. Quillerin." The man at the top of the stairs was excessively tall and elegantly slender. Mount Clemens wore a dark red velvet jacket, and his face impressed the newsman as poetic. Perhaps it was the way the thin hair was combed down on the high forehead. A fragrance of lime peel surrounded him. "Apologies for the moat and drawbridge arrangement downstairs," said the critic. "In this neighborhood, one takes no chances." He gave Quillerin a left-handed handshake and ushered him into a living room unlike anything the newsman had ever seen. It was crowded and shadowy. The only illumination came from a flagging blaze in the fireplace and from hidden spotlights beamed on works of art. Quillerin's eye itemized marble busts, Chinese vases, many gilded picture frames, a bronze warrior, and some crumbling wood carvings of angels. One wall of the high-ceilinged room was covered with a tapestry having life-size figures of medieval damsels. Over the fireplace was a painting that any moviegoer would recognize as a Van Gogh. "You seem impressed by my little collection, Mr. Quillerin," said the critic, "or appalled by my eclectic taste. Here, let me take your coat." "It's a pocket-sized museum," said Quillerin in awe. "It is my life, Mr. Quillerin. And I admit, quite without modesty, that it succeeds in having a certain ambiance. Hardly an inch of dark red wall remained uncovered. The fireplace was flanked by well-stocked bookshelves. Other walls were stacked to the ceiling with paintings. Even the red carpet, which had a luminosity of its own, was crowded, with oversized chairs, tables, pedestals, a desk, and a lighted cabinet filled with small carvings. "Let me pour you an aperitif," said Mount Clemens, "and then you can collapse into an easy chair and prop your feet up. I avoid serving anything stronger than sherry or Dubonnet before dinner, because I am rather proud of my culinary skill, and I prefer not to paralyze your taste buds." "I can't have alcohol," said Quillerin, "so my taste buds are always in first-class condition." "Then how about a lemon and bitters?" While Mount Clemens was out of the room, Quillerin became aware of other details. A dictating machine on the desk, music drifting from behind an oriental screen, two deep-cushioned lounge chairs facing each other in front of the fire, sharing a plump ottoman between them. He tried one of the chairs and was swallowed up in the cushions. Resting his head back and putting his feet on the ottoman, he experienced an unholy kind of comfort. He almost hoped Mount Clemens would never return with the lemon and bitters. "Is the music satisfactory?" asked the critic, as he placed a tray at Quillerin's elbow. "I find Debussy soothing at this time of day. Here is something salty to nibble with your drink. I see you have gravitated to the right chair." "This chair is the next best thing to being unconscious," said Quillerin. "What's it covered with? It reminds me of something they used to make boys' knee pants out of." "Heather corduroy," said Mount Clemens. "A miracle fabric not yet discovered by scientists. Their preoccupation with man-made materials amounts to blasphemy." "I'm living in a hotel where everything is plastic. It makes an old flesh and blood character like me feel obsolete." "As you can see, by looking around you, I ignore modern technology." "I'm surprised," said Quillerin. "In your reviews you favor modern art, and yet everything here is—" He couldn't think of a word that sounded complimentary. "I beg to correct you," said Mount Clemens. He gestured grandly toward a pair of lowered doors. "In that closet is a small fortune in 20th century art, under ideal conditions of temperature and humidity. Those are my investments, but these paintings you see on the walls are my friends. I believe in the art of today as an expression of its time, but I choose to live with the mellowness of the past. For the same reason, I am attempting to preserve this fine old house." Mount Clemens, sitting there in his velvet jacket, with Italian pumps on his long narrow feet, and a dark red aperitif in his long white fingers, looked smug, sure, safe, and unreal. His nasal voice, the music, the comfortable chair, the warmth of the fire, and the dimness of the room were making Quillerin drowsy. He needed action. "Mind if I smoke?" he said. "Cigarettes in that cloisonné box at your elbow." "I use a pipe." Quillerin searched for his quarter-bend bulldog and his tobacco pouch and his matches and commenced the ritual of lighting up. As the flame from his match flared in the darkened room, he jerked his head to the side. He stared at the bookshelves. He saw a red light. It was like a signal. No, it was two red lights, blazing red and alive. Quillerin gasped. The rush of breath extinguished the match, and the red signals disappeared. "What was that?" he said when he stopped spluttering. "Something between the books. Something—" "It was only the cat," said Mount Clemens. He likes to retire behind the books. The shelves are unusually deep because of my art books, and he can find a sanctum back there. Apparently, he has had his afternoon nap behind the biographies. He seems to favor biographies. I never saw a cat with blazing red eyes, said Quillerin. You will find that characteristic of Siamese cats. Shine a light in their eyes, and they turn ruby red. Ordinarily, they are blue, like the blue in that Van Gogh. See for yourself when the cat decides to flatter us with his presence. For the moment, he prefers seclusion. He is busy sensing you. Already, he knows several things about you. But what does he know? Quillerin squirmed in his chair. Having observed you, he knows you are unlikely to make any loud noises or sudden movements, and that is in your favor. So is your pipe. He likes pipes, and he knows that you smoked one, even before you extracted it from your pocket. He also realizes you are affiliated with a newspaper. How does he figure that? Ink. He has quite a nose for printer's ink. Anything else? At this moment, he is flashing a message. He is telling me to serve the first course, or he will not get his own dinner until midnight. Mount Clemens left the room and returned with a tray of hot tarts. If you have no objection, he said, we shall have the first course in the parlor. I have no servants, and you must forgive me if I employ a few informalities. The crust was flaky. The filling was a tender custard, flecked with cheese and spinach. Quillerin savored every mouthful. You may wonder, said the critic, why I prefer to manage without servants. I have a morbid fear of robbery, and I want no strangers coming to the house and discovering the valuables I keep on the premises. Please be good enough not to mention my collection downtown. Certainly, if that's the way you feel. I know how you newspaper people function. You are purveyors of news by instinct and by habit. You mean we're a bunch of gossips, said Quillerin amiably, enjoying the last forkful of cheese custard and wondering what would come next. Let us simply say that a great deal of information, correct and otherwise, is exchanged over the tables at the press club. Nevertheless, I feel I can trust you. Thank you. What a pity you don't drink wine. I had planned to celebrate this occasion by opening a bottle of Chateau Claude d'Estrenel 45. It was a great vintage, very slow in maturing, even better than the 28s. Open it anyway, Quillerin said. I'll enjoy watching you enjoy it, honestly. Mount Clemens's eyes sparkled. I need no further encouragement, and I shall pour you a glass of Catawba grape juice. I keep it in the house for him. Who? Cao Ko Kung. Quillerin's face went momentarily blank. The cat, said Mount Clemens. Forgive me for forgetting you have not been formally introduced. He is very fond of grape juice, especially the white, and nothing but the best brand. He is a connoisseur. He sounds like quite a cat, Quillerin said. A remarkable creature. He has cultivated an appreciation for certain periods of art, and although I disagree with his choice, I admire his independence. He also reads newspaper headlines, as you will see when the late edition is delivered. And now I believe we are ready for the soup. The critic drew aside some dark red velvet curtains. An aroma of lobster greeted Quillerin in the dining alcove. Plates of soup, thick and creamy, were placed on a bare table that looked hundreds of years old. Thick candles burned in iron holders. As he seated himself in a lavishly carved, high-backed chair, he heard a thud in the living room. It was followed by 30 mutterings. A floorboard creaked, and a light-colored cat with a dark face and slanting eyes, walked into the dining alcove. "This is Cao Ko Kung," said Mount Clemens. "He was named after a 13th century artist, and he himself has the dignity and grace of Chinese art." Cao Ko Kung stood motionless and looked at Quillerin. Quillerin looked at Cao Ko Kung. He saw a long, lean, muscular cat with sleek fur and an unbearable amount of assurance and authority. Quillerin said, "If he's thinking what I think he's thinking, I'd better leave." "He is only sensing you," said Mount Clemens, "and he appears stern when he concentrates. He is sensing you with his eyes, ears, nose, and whiskers. His feelings from all 4 avenues of investigation will be relayed to a central point for evaluation and synthesis, and, depending upon the verdict, he may or may not accept you." "Thanks," said Quillerin. "He is somewhat of a hermit and suspicious of outsiders." The cat took his time, and, when he had finished looking at the visitor, calmly and without visible effort, rose in vertical flight to the top of a tall cabinet. "Whoosh," said Quillerin. "Did you see that?" On top of the cabinet, Cao Ko Kung arranged himself in an imperious posture and watched the scene below with intelligent interest. "A 7-foot leap is not unusual for a Siamese," said Mount Clemens. "Cats have many gifts that are denied humans, and yet we tend to rate them by human standards. To understand a cat, you must realize that he has his own gifts, his own viewpoint, even his own morality. A cat's lack of speech does not make him a lower animal. Cats have a contempt of speech. Why should they talk when they can communicate without words? They manage very well among themselves, and they patiently try to make their thoughts known to humans. But in order to read a cat, you must be relaxed and receptive." The critic's manner was serious and scholarly. "For the most part," he went on, "cats resort to pantomime when dealing with humans. Cao Ko Kung uses a code which is not difficult to learn. He scratches objects to call attention. He sniffs to indicate suspicion. He rubs against ankles when he wants service, and he shows his teeth to express disapproval. He also has a catly way of thumbing his nose." "That I've got to see." "Very simple. When a cat, who is a picture of grace and beauty, suddenly rolls over in a hideous posture, contorts his face, and scratches his ear, he is telling you, sir, to go to blazes." Mount Clemens removed the soup plates and brought in a tureen of chicken in a dark and mysterious sauce. A piercing howl came from the top of the cabinet. Quillerin said, "You don't need an antenna to tune in that kind of message." "The lack of an antenna in the human anatomy," said the critic, "impresses me as a vast oversight, a cosmic blunder. With some simple arrangement of feelers or whiskers, think what man might have achieved in communication and prognostication. What we call extrasensory perception is normal experience for a cat. He knows what you are thinking, what you are going to do, and where you have been. I would gladly trade 1 ear and 1 eye for a full set of cat's whiskers in good working condition." Quillerin put down his fork and wiped his mustache carefully with his napkin. "That's very interesting," he said. He coughed once or twice and then leaned toward his host. "Do you want to know something? I have a funny feeling about my mustache. I've never told this to anyone, but ever since I grew this set of lip whiskers, I've had a weird idea that I'm more aware. Do you know what I mean?" Mount Clemens nodded encouragingly. "It's something I wouldn't want to get around at the press club," Quillerin said. Mount Clemens agreed. I seem to see things more clearly, said the newsman. Mount Clemens understood. Sometimes I seem to sense what's going to happen, and I turn up in the right place at the right time. It's uncanny. Cao Ko Kung does the same thing. A deep grumble came from the top of the cabinet, and the cat stood up, arched his back in a taut stretch, yawned widely, and jumped to the floor with a grunt and velvety thud. Watch this, said the critic. In 3 or 4 minutes, the doorbell will ring, and it will be the newspaper delivery. Right now, the newsboy is riding his bicycle 2 blocks away, but Cao Ko Kung knows he's on his way here. The cat walked across the living room to the hall and waited at the top of the stairs. In a few minutes, the doorbell rang. Mount Clemens said to Quillerin, Would you be good enough to pick up the newspaper downstairs? He likes to read it while the news is fresh. Meanwhile, I will toss the salad. The cat waited on the top stair with a dignified display of interest, while the newsman walked down to retrieve the paper that had been tossed on the front porch. Lay the paper on the floor, Mount Clemens instructed him, and Cao Ko Kung will read the headlines. The cat followed this procedure closely. His nose twitched with anticipation. His whiskers moved up and down twice. Then he lowered his head to the screamer head, which was printed in 2-inch type, and touched each letter with his nose, tracing the words. Deban Relic Dam. Quillerin said, Does he always read backwards? He reads from right to left, Mount Clemens said. By the way, I hope you like Caesar salad. It was a man's salad, zesty and full of crunch. Then came a bittersweet chocolate dessert with a velvet texture, and Quillerin felt miraculously in harmony with a world in which art critics could cook like French chefs and cats could read. Later, they had small cups of Turkish coffee in the living room, and Mount Clemens said, How are you enjoying your new milieu? I'm meeting some interesting personalities. The artists in this city have more personality than talent, I regret to say. This Cal Halape is a hard one to figure out. He is a charlatan, said Mount Clemens. His paintings belong in advertisements for shampoo. His wife is decorative if she keeps her mouth shut, but unfortunately she finds this an impossible feat. He also has a houseboy or protege, or whatever the charitable term may be, who has the insolence to want a retrospective exhibition of his life's work at the age of 21. Have you met any other representatives of this city's remarkable art life? Earl Lambreth. He seems to be. There is a pathetic case. No talent whatever, but he hopes to reach the stars on his wife's apron strings. His one and only achievement has been to marry an artist. How he managed to win such an attractive woman is beyond my imagination. She's good looking, all right, Quillerin agreed. And an excellent artist, although she needs to clean up her palette. She has done some studies of Cao Ko Kung, capturing all his mystery, magic, perversity, independence, playfulness, savagery, and loyalty in one pair of eyes. I met Mrs. Lambreth at the Turpin Chisel last weekend. There was a party. Are those aging adolescents still dressing up in fancy costumes? It was a Valentine party. They all represented great lovers. First prize went to a woman sculptor called Butchie Bolton. You know her? Yes, said the critic, and good taste prevents me from making any comment whatever. I suppose Madame Duxbury was also there, dripping with sables and Gainsboroughs. Quillerin got out his pipe and took a long time lighting it. Then Cao Ko Kung walked into the room from the direction of the kitchen and performed his after-dinner ritual for all to admire. In studious concentration, he darted his long pink tongue over his face. Next he licked his right paw well, and used it to wash his right ear. Then he changed paws and repeated the identical process on the left. One pass over the whiskers, one pass over the cheekbone, twice over the eye, once over the brow, once over the ear, once over the back of the head. Mount Clemens said to Quillerin, "You may feel complimented. When a cat washes up in front of you, he is admitting you into his world. Where are you planning to live?" "I want to find a furnished apartment as soon as possible. Anything to get sprung from that plastic-coated hotel." "I have a vacancy downstairs," said Mount Clemens. "Small but adequate, and furnished rather well. It has a gas fireplace and some of my second-best impressionists. The rent would be insignificant. My chief interest is to have the place occupied." "Sounds good," said Quillerin from the depths of his lounge chair, with memories of Caesar salad and lobster bisque still soothing him. "I travel a great deal, viewing exhibitions and serving on art juries. And in this dubious neighborhood, it is a good idea to have signs of life in the front apartment downstairs." "I'd like to have a look at it." "Regardless of rumors that I am a monster," said Mount Clemens in his most agreeable tone, "you will not find me a bad landlord. Everyone hates a critic, you know, and I imagine the gossips have described me as a sort of cultivated Beelzebub with artistic pretensions. I have few friends and thankfully no relatives, with the exception of a sister in Milwaukee who refuses to disown me. I am somewhat of a recluse." Quillerin made an understanding gesture with his pipe. "A critic cannot afford to mix with artists," Mount Clemens went on, "and when you hold yourself aloof, you invite jealousy and hatred. All my friends are here in this room, and I care for nothing else. My only ambition is to own works of art. I am never satisfied. Let me show you my latest acquisition. Did you know that Renoir painted window shades at one time in his career?" The critic leaned forward and lowered his voice, and a peculiar elation shone in his face. "I have 2 window shades painted by Renoir." A shrill howl came from Cao Ko Kung, who was sitting in a tall, compact posture, gazing into the fire. It was a Siamese comment that Quillerin could not translate. More than anything else, it sounded like a portent.